So I'd like to introduce to you Kelly Stack, the Director of Digital Strategy for Northwestern University. Over the next hour, Kelly is going to uncover how to build and maintain a successful integrated strategy with digital at the core. Kelly Stack is a digital marketing expert rooted in more than 10 years of interdisciplinary experience across industries, including nonprofit, pet care, telecommunications, finance, packaged goods and services, healthcare, and of course, education. Currently serving in Northwestern's Global Communications Office, Kelly leads the institution's digital strategy and provides digital leadership and support for a number of units on campus. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Mallory, and thanks everybody for joining us. As Mallory said, I've been across lots and lots of industries, most recently coming from agency land over to higher ed about 3 years ago, and it has been quite the ride. So with that, I'll share some insights from both the agency side as well as lots of learnings that have been applied now to higher ed. The agenda for today reads sort of like a recipe for what does digital at the core for an integrated strategy look like. So at the beginning, first of all, we need buy-in, right? So we need to all buy in that digital is important. Next, we need to create a data-driven strategy, understand content strategy versus channel strategy. So what are the differences there? How do we structure our teams for success? And then finally, what are the tools that we use to get us there? We will end with plenty of time for Q&A. So buy-in. This was probably one of the biggest surprises as I got to higher ed. So we're seeing in lots of industries, digital, social media in particular as an afterthought. Obviously, higher ed is no different, and in some ways, we're more behind than others. So what do we do to get there, and how can we convince our comrades that digital is indeed important? Well, one way is with facts, right? So something we have at our advantage in higher ed is that data is important and everybody is really into data. So this data point should end all conversations. So US teens use an average of 9 hours of media per day. So for all the parents out there, I'm sure this is a scary statistic, but it's reality. It's the world that we live in. Something we talk about often at Northwestern, and I know colleagues at other institutions are, so how do we balance offline versus online? Where should we be? And that begs the question I'd like to ask you all. We're going to enter a little poll, all right? So would you rather have the Chicago Tribune print a story about a discovery at your institution, post to Facebook about a discovery at your institution, or tweet about a discovery at your institution? So we're gonna put, I think, 15 seconds on the clock and then come back.
Okay, so about 28% think printing a story about a discovery at your institution is best. 22% mentioned tweeting, and 47% picked Facebook.
There isn't a right or a wrong answer. However, I can give you this. I can give you the daily circulation of the Tribune is 448,930. The Chicago Tribune has 550,668 fans, and they are followed by 994,000 people. Now, we know that reach isn't your entire fan base, but then potential reach, it can be much larger than your fan base. So those of you that were skewing on what you would rather see something posted on the social channels, I think you're in the right area. Next, we're going to hear from our good friend, Bill Gates. And Bill Gates said, the internet is becoming the town square of the global village of tomorrow. So when he said that, he was talking about today. So what are they doing today? Today, 86% of Americans are currently internet users. And guess what? They are all using social media. 79% of online Americans use Facebook. 76% of those check it at least once a day, and 88% of those are on Facebook users, are ages 18 to 29. So ages 18 to 29, those are our current students in our current young alumni base. But what about the future students and young alumni? We often hear people say that teens aren't using Facebook anymore. It's all about Snapchat. Well, here's another surprise for you. Regularly used social media networks of children to teens age 12 to 19 years old are as follows. YouTube, 67%, followed just by Facebook actually, and then Instagram and Snapchat's actually after Instagram. So what we're seeing is, though we hear lots and lots and lots about Snapchat rather, it's getting lots of good press. It's not the most used channel by kids that age. So once we've bought in and we know that digital is important and we've convinced everyone in our institutions that digital is important, we have to do something with it, right? So how do we ensure that what we're building is successful? Even before we think of what kind of content we're going to build, we need to think about what success looks like. So the first thing we'll talk about what I call the cable conundrum. So it's all about knowing what questions you need to answer. And this is a story about a cable giant that will not be named. And this cable giant spent $4 billion on a new computing system. This computing system included CRM and all kinds of great stuff. And then they got a new CEO. And the CEO had 50 questions. And he said, great, I'm coming in at a great time, right? You've just made this major investment, $4 billion in this new system. So you should be able to answer all 50 questions. In fact, they were only able to answer 8. The questions that we were asking were not really complicated. So one of the questions they were unable to answer was, when you subscribe for 2 years at a cable place and you get that deal for up to 2 years and then you go back to regular costs, how many people leave after those 2 years? And then do they come back after another 2 years, right? Because they know that if they're leaving one, the other cable company has that deal. So they could not answer that question. A really critical business question could not be answered by a massive computing system because the right questions weren't asked up front. So before we build out a dashboard and start just saying, we need to know bounce rates, we need to know click rates for X, Y, and Z. The key is to get to the bottom of what are we really trying to answer. So do we want to know how many people come, and when they come, what are they interested in? So ask human questions and use the data to answer those questions. And now we need to make sure we have the right data, right? So we need to build properties that will provide the data that we need. In a news site, that might be, if you have content buckets, which we'll talk about later, how do we organize our site in a way such that we will get the data that we need? So we might organize the site amongst content buckets. We might provide a trending bucket so that we can see how that works. What people are reading, what most recently. And then really we have to build our systems, right? Because none of us have staff that are going to sit there and manually input related stories, trending stories every day. So how can we build our back ends to not only serve up content in a way that is modern and that people are expecting and will interact with and stay with longer, but that will also give us the information that we need to improve our strategies. So as we think about data, I just had my second child, so I really have baby on the brain, but we do want to treat data like a baby. Right, so we want to feed it with new information. We want to play with it as a form of learning. When we don't know something, we want to dig in deeper to try to figure out what's going on and not really just make assumptions. An example of that might be, as I presented at the end of last year, bounce rates on our homepage went up. And that was alarming to many senior staff because we had just put a large investment in completely overhauling our main web entities. So bounce rate going up was a really big problem for them until we said, but wait, we played with the data and we dug deeper and look at what's going on with our mobile share. So our mobile share increased 82.93% year over year. And that makes it so that we are not concerned with bounce rates, because guess what? We know that bounce rates are going to increase as mobile share increases. And we also know that that consumer behavior is on their devices. So we're actually really happy to be in a place where consumers are looking at our content on their devices on the go, where they are every day. And we're happy to take some fluctuation in our bounce rate to see that happen. Very related, our good friend Ellen Gomez said, one of the best ways to sabotage your content is to not tie it to your goals. So know why you're creating the content. That goes right back to that cable story of understanding what questions you need to answer, and also know why you're creating your content. So what are your goals? Which leads us into content strategy versus channel strategy, right? So content strategy is really, what do you want to say? So what do you want to say about your institution and why? And channel strategy is, what's the smartest place to say that? So we'll dive into content strategy. When you're starting to create a content strategy, it's really helpful to lay out a few ground rules. For example, what are the institutional marketing objectives? We're going to really lay out also some content musts. Okay, so at Northwestern, for example, our content must offer value to one or more of our core audiences. It must fall into a strategic area for the institution, and it must use a brand pillar as a lens for storytelling. And what I mean by brand pillar is what does your brand represent, right? So is it multidimensional? Is it collaborative? And whatever those brand pillars are, we can use that as a lens for storytelling so that it all presents a cohesive voice. So if, for example, collaboration is one of your brand pillars, then we're going to want to, whenever possible, even as we're talking about research, talk about the collaboration that went into that research. As I started to touch on, we're going to focus on the goals of the institution, right, with our content strategy. So what are the institutional marketing objectives? Typically, we want to see marketing objectives tied to business objectives. Okay, what are the institutional marketing objectives? What subjects define you? What resources can you draw on, and what's most important? This can be challenging for many institutions. I know when I got to Northwestern 3 years ago, there certainly was not a marketing playbook that said, here are our institutional marketing objectives. This is what defines us, right? Because we're in higher ed, and that is not speak that many of our senior faculty members or even senior administrators are accustomed to using. So we have to take sort of higher ed speak and translate it into marketing objectives. So understand in the president or the chancellor's address, what's he talking about? What's he saying is really important to your institution? At the beginning of the year, if your provost writes out an email, what are the things that he says he's going to focus on that year, he or she, excuse me, says they're going to focus on that year, and how can we draw from that? So literally we would take all of these documents and pull out bullets of what they said was really important, and then that translated very much into our marketing objectives. Also gave us a really good basis on the types of subjects that are important to our school, either that are strengths for our school or that we would like to have be strengths for our school. So now we go into thinking about how we organize meaningful content, right? We know what the meaningful content is. How are we going to organize it in something in a way in which we can use? So drawing from, again, all of those different sources, we found all of these different buckets of types of areas that are really important to Northwestern. So everything from nanotechnology to global initiatives to media. So then we take our content buckets and we can put them into channel specific buckets. So for example, social media might have, so from these 20 buckets, we might then be able to reduce them into 5 or 6 to 10. Science, medicine, innovation and tech, arts and humanities, economics, law, global. And why do we do all of this, right? We do all of this so that we can be sure that we are hitting on what's important to the university or institution, but we also do this so that, going back to our data-driven strategy, so that when we say, when we get asked the question, okay, well, nanotechnology is really important to us, how are we doing? Are people reading our nanotechnology content? Are we putting out enough nanotechnology content? And we think about, there's always going to be news that happens, but if, for example, there aren't groundbreaking discoveries in the area of science this month, but we can't go an entire month without any science data, or content rather. So what we can do is we can then take more ownership over our content strategy, right? So we can proactively build content. We can seek people in those different departments and say, tell us about what you're doing. We know that it isn't in a white paper yet, but are there other things that we can talk about in the area that you are working in that we can really put out in social media about our university? So once we feel really, really great about the content that we're producing and that it is indeed laddering up to things that are meaningful for our institution, we think about where to put all of that, right? So content distribution, where is each piece of content going to be most effective? And the hint here is that it depends on the content. We focus obviously on owned channels. We're always going to be pitching, but that is very much, again, taking the control outside of the institution. So we really focus on what can we control. We control our own channels. We can control our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, our Googles, and our YouTubes. So on our website, we might focus on macro stories that personify our brand. We might have a heavier focus on needing to represent one or more brand pillars, okay? We're going to keep it serious and sprinkle in some fun. So every time you come to our homepage, there might be a different story that's representative of our brand, but it's not all going to be campus beauty. Twitter is going to be sound bites, things that we think that journalists might pick up on. Instagram, on the other hand, is going to be a lot of campus beauty and a lot of sort of school spirity type stuff, because we know that that content performs really well on Instagram. And it's also an important part of our brand, right? So something that we have struggled with in the past and continue to test and learn on is, how do we talk about research on Instagram? How do we talk about research on even Snapchat? Is that the right channel for it? Probably not. But then again, we wouldn't put campus beauty items on LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn is a place where we really stick to serious thought leadership. On Google and YouTube, that's where we allow ourselves to dig deep. We allow ourselves to go long form if we need to, short form if we need to, many different forms on the same topic even. We are going to now shift over to structure. So whenever I speak to marketers from any institution, whether it's a large university, a college, or a single school, I consistently hear that silos are an issue, and how do we overcome that? So rest assured, Northwestern is no different, but we have made great strides in the last 3 to 4 years. So I'm excited to share with you some of those movements that we've made. Again, when global marketing was created at Northwestern 5 years ago, it was its own entity focused on global branding efforts. We had university relations, which is our legacy communications team. We had social media that sat within global marketing, but used to sit in university relations and weren't exactly sure where we belonged or who was the best team to align with. Fast forward 4 years, and we really look at how can we all work together to align on a common mission, right? So whether it's a school that has, like Northwestern, several different schools, hundreds of centers, etc. What's that common ground that we can find that aligns on our goals and gives us a reason to work together. So in this, we put the story in the very center. This example is with nanotechnology. I can share that we work really closely with our nanotechnology group, and it's a difficult subject to have as a priority for an institution, right? Because nobody knows what it is. We do believe that it is the future, and we are very committed to that. So while a professor might present a white paper at a conference, which is completely appropriate for that audience, and they'll know exactly what he's saying, and they can all pronounce the same words, that isn't a way that we can educate the common population or our future attendees about nanotechnology. So what we can do, though, is we can educate with a video, and I'll just play it so you can see sort of the tone. I know you won't be able to hear the audio, but we did work with one of our institutes. They made this video. It's 5 minutes and 32 seconds. It is an amazing video that really gives you a breadth and depth of nanotechnology, what it means, where we're going with it, lots of good interviews. And we think that's really appropriate for YouTube. However, we've also seen that our most successful videos have people hang on for 6 to 8 seconds. So what we might do is, again, this common goal, the center's goal, the university's goal, and marketing's goal is to make sure that we are seen as a leader in nanotechnology, whether that means informing the mass populace of what, excuse me, of what nanotechnology is, or to dig deeper into nano specific topics. That's what we're going to do together. Therefore, global marketing communications will step in and say, okay, so you've got your white paper for your conference, you're good to go there. We've got the long form video for YouTube, we're good to go there. But guess what? We have a really, really large Instagram following. So we think that we can increase your reach on educating the general population on nanotechnology. So why don't we take an 8-second cut of that video to tell what the story of what even just a nanometer is, so that that's better understandable. Then that's a great example of having that story and that common goal at the center, and figuring out what unit is best to tell what story, but again, working together for that common goal. As we think about changing the status quo and really working together, there are lots of things that the university has done over recent years, the recent 2 years in particular, to really move this forward. I talked about a story first strategy. Something else that's been really impactful for us, and I hope can work for others, is 5-minute meetings, right? So we had a really hard time cracking the code on how do we communicate across all of these different entities, even if it's, again, a smaller institution and you're struggling with talking across marketing, admissions, and alumni. How do we do that without really burdening meetings and keeping it a seamless process? So we introduced 5-minute meetings. And 5-minute meetings, truthfully, are 5 minutes. I know that is like a shocking concept, especially in higher ed, but we do limit them to 5 minutes, and they are led by two of our junior team members. They get up, they take turns getting up in the morning. So 1 week, one will lead, and the next week the other will. And they're really focused on what are the main stories of the day and what's trending on social media, and how might Northwestern fit into the current news cycle. So when something hits, we're not going, oh, let's start writing a press release about it right now. No, we might go, okay, this is a news topic, so we really want to be in the news on this topic today, versus starting a story today, having to go through the editing process, and maybe hitting the news cycle 2 days after it's already passed. So with these 5-minute meetings, we allow call-ins from a marketing member from each of the major schools and units, and we go through, again, what's trending that day. From June 5th to October 11th this year, we gained 35 media advisories, 93 placements, and 14 social media opportunities out of just these 5-minute meetings. 47% of our placements were top tier, meaning New York Times, Wash Post, Reuters, etc. And 20% of those were new media. So we're also foraying into the land of Vox, Huffington Post, Mike, Politico, NPR, Mashable, etc. It's been a huge transition in how we're thinking about approaching storytelling and really being current and relevant in the current news cycle. And it's been really successful for us. We continue to test and learn there and are excited to see what comes next. Another innovation we've begun is called an idea lab. So in the past, say a discovery was happening in ISIN in one of our units, a black hole, right? We're part of a group that was finally able to confirm that black holes exist, this big, huge discovery. In the past, the status quo would have been, okay, in addition to the media advisories and making sure that our researchers are ready for media, we will write a press release, and then that press release will go out on Facebook and Twitter, and then we're good. The Idea Lab is taking all of that and throwing it to the wayside. It's saying, let's think about, as a group, as an interdisciplinary group, so social media, media relations, and marketing, and then whatever other groups are relevant, whether it's admissions or alumni relations. Let's get everyone to the table that makes sense, and let's brainstorm. Let's have fun with this. Let's think about the best thing for this story, so that the best thing for this story might still be a press release and a post to Facebook and a slightly different post to Twitter. That's okay. That might be the answer. The answer might also be, actually, the best opportunity for this is going to be a very small video that we're going to put on Instagram, and we might put some paid behind it, $20 or $30 to see what happens and get the best reach. We might also say, this is a huge opportunity and we do have time. So maybe we can put some real marketing dollars behind this and produce something that's going to be a brand video that we put in several places, make several different cuts of. So it's really the idea of the Idea Lab is to not have a foregone conclusion and to really let the content shine in the best channel and in the best form possible. Something that our CMO started initially 4 to 5 years ago, right when global marketing was established, is called a brand working group. So this brand working group initially was made up of marketers from across the university and others within their offices to help us understand everything we needed to know about Northwestern and make sure we weren't missing the mark. We've evolved that because now that we know the university intimately and have a set mission and goals, we're now leading that group. But the key here is that we do have a brand working group of professionals, marketing communications professionals that are really committed to interdisciplinary work and integrated work. And we meet once a quarter. So this is probably, gosh, I think 100 people from across the institution. And we do everything from sort of a show and tell. Does anyone have anything really interesting? A failure, a success, a question? Is there a new initiative that we are kicking off that we would like to show them about? We'll always share learnings and data and are pretty open books about our successes and failures as the central marketing arm as well. And then have a healthy time for questions and answers. Something that we began about 3 years ago when I came as well was social summits. So the same idea, once a quarter, we meet with the social teams from across the university. And lots of times the social team is the administrator and the marketer. And so these like single people that have lots and lots on their plates, and social media might just be a tiny bit of their job. So with that, we'll talk about, especially for those where social media isn't your whole job or marketing isn't your whole job. So what tools, right? What tools do we use to help us succeed? first we want to think about marketing as an investment area. And this can be a tall order, right, in any industry and definitely in higher education. But just knowing that, especially at Northwestern, we do look at marketing as an investment area, and we are very conscious that getting our brand out in the world is a necessary fact of life in the year 2017, and we need to be there to compete with other institutions. We know the digital tools can greatly aid in an integration process and help us ensure viable strategies, right? So we know that there are lots of paid tools and some are free. I can say that typically you get what you pay for. So if you're in a position to be able to allocate some budget to tools, that's great. If not, that there are some free tools that I'd like to share that are also definitely better than nothing. We'll start with the paid side. So social media tools that you might consider checking out if you haven't already are Sprinklr, Hootsuite, and Sprout Social as that first bullet. So we conducted an RFP a year and a half ago. We were really looking at a tool that could help all of our marketers, especially those that had several other job responsibilities, better equip themselves to be successful with social media. We also wanted something that would aid us in this integration process, right? So we're not getting 50 emails a day from different units the day that they would like us to post something to help elevate their reach. So we ended up going with Sprinklr for that reason. They do have a suggestion queue and some content calendar planners that really worked for us. So this is not a sales pitch for Sprinklr, but just sharing some of the tools that we have found to be successful. Track Maven is another great tool that we use. We really use this to look at content in a way that will help us understand what other schools, institutions, even corporations are doing with certain types of content. So just going back to nanotechnology, if it's a topic that's really important to us and we're trying to push that, we want to understand what other schools are doing in that topic. How are they talking about nanotechnology and what's performing well for them? And Track Maven helps us do that. It also has some great analytics. MishGuru and Snapalytics are newer tools. They are both Snapchat tools. So although the future of Snapchat is yet to be seen, right now it's really difficult to have analytics for Snapchat. So these types of tools help us see analytics, and MishGuru also allows you to schedule snaps. When we think about data visualization, we found Tableau and Crazy to be really helpful. We think about, presenting data to senior staff and to deans and people that might not typically see marketing data, and we want to really present it in a way that they can understand it, and we can come to a common understanding of performance, but also potential needs moving forward. So those have been really helpful. For SEO, we looked at, actually recently, SEO and SEM, we've looked at several different vendors and really liked what we saw from both Conductor and BrightEdge. We found that Conductor seemed to be more out of the box, required perhaps less work, less of a person than BrightEdge, though BrightEdge did seem to be more robust. So again, not a sales pitch for any of these tools, but just wanted to share what we've seen. Some free tools we can talk about are for social media, TweetDeck. And if you aren't aware, Facebook does actually have a scheduler built in. So I know many of our units were not aware of this functionality. So we know many other social media tools also have free trials for limited time use. So for analytics, I hope that you all are using Google Analytics. I know that, for example, we oversee hundreds of websites for the school centrally, And while everyone is using Google Analytics, there is definitely a sliding scale as to how effectively, right? So is it set up correctly? Are we using Tag Manager to tag events so that we can see what people are clicking on and when and what's leading them there and things like that. So those are all free tools that are really rich if you have them set up appropriately. So it's certainly worth the time and investment in watching those hour-long videos that Google provides. Google Search Console. Tableau also has a free version, as does Bitly and SimilarWeb for competitive analysis. If you're looking to understand more about SEO and SEM and some free tools, SEMrush and Moz Keyword Explorer are some great ones to check out.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly, so much for your insights today. As you were talking, I am really curious to know how you and your team were able to get senior administrators and deans really on board with the integration changes at Northwestern. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I'll be very frank in that one of our biggest concerns was just that, right? So, and we had lots of people tell us, you're never going to get the deans on board, and you have to get the deans on board to get the schools on board. And how are you going to do that? We started with data. So I talked about that a little bit in the data section. And we really did our homework. We employed a huge brand study. And from that, we're able to show where Northwestern stands, where we're strong, and really where we needed to shore up some things. And presenting a strong rationale with data behind it really resonated with our senior admins and deans.
Awesome. Thank you. So I see that Jacob is curious if you have a specific point person on your team that manages and organizes content and when it actually publishes.
So we don't have one person. We have a content team. So there's one of our team members is responsible for pushing publish on our homepage. One is responsible for doing that on the news page. We have someone else that's responsible for doing it on social media. And again, these are not the sole responsibilities of these folks, just to point out that they are different people for different channels. But there is an integrated meeting every week in which we make those decisions.
Awesome. Another attendee is wondering if we can revisit the concept of a story-first approach, and how does that strategy help tell a story better in a more digital friendly way? That's one really good question. Wouldn't you say?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. So it's really thinking about when you have a whole story that is going to be better consumed in different ways on different channels, right? So when we think about Instagram, that's obviously a very visual channel. In the last year and a half, they've provided us with more and more ways to tell stories, right? So Instagram stories, and you can tap through them versus a long form YouTube story like the one that you guys will see when we share the slide deck. But really the way that it's helped us is to be able to create content for channels so that are true to the story. So how are we best going to get eyeballs and engagement on a story? And that is to create content specifically for different channels around a story.
Great. Another question came through the chat. Jacob is wondering if you and your team uses a specific tool to aid you with content planning and distribution.
Yes, so we use Smartsheets, and that is also, all of this is very new for us. It's new within the past 2 years for our team, and within our integrated team, it's just been over the past 8 months or so.
Sure. Another tool, I don't know if you've heard of this. I think it's pretty new. It's called PowerPost. I don't know too much about it, but from what I've heard, it sounds pretty interesting and allows for multi-team integration. Attendees, if you're interested in PowerPost, shoot me a message, because I think I might be able to help facilitate that. But that's just one I've heard recently that's new and interesting.
That's great. And I can say before we knew that Northwestern had an agreement with Smartsheets and we could leverage that. We used Google, and we used Google Drive and Google Sheets, and that is a free solution that to be honest with you, especially when we were a smaller team, worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Bianca and I love ourselves a few Google Docs and Google Sheets in our day-to-day lives, and helping us with the management of content and measurement and all sorts of things. So that, yeah, definitely don't underestimate the power of a good Google Doc, right?
Absolutely.
So I have a little bit of insight into this since mStoner recently relaunched the Medill School's website, but I'd love to know a little more about, you know, Northwestern's so large. Like, is everyone using an agency? What are you doing in-house, you know, and how does that kind of play into all of this integrated strategy?
Sure. So the answer is both. Yes, some people and some schools use agencies, and lots of stuff is also done in-house. So I can share that when global marketing was begun, and that big piece of research that I alluded to earlier, we did use an agency to help us with that. We also did use an agency partner when we rebranded in 2015. Since then, we have done most of our global work in-house. But schools like Medill, some of our individual schools will engage the help of agencies. Something that the mStoner team is, I'm sure, aware of is as a central resource, something that we do try to provide is assistance and brand continuity across our platforms. So even though they might, a certain school might engage an agency to, for example, redo their websites, we will provide them with, here are some web templates or base code that we would love for you to consider heavily using. So I'm not sure if others experience this in their institutions, but we don't mandate anything from the center, right? So everything that we do and everything that we accomplish as an integrated group is really due from data and from just hand-holding and providing good services and helpful tools. So web templates, et cetera, are good examples of that.